That's inflammatory bowel disease has two branches. So you have Crohn's disease, which is anything from mouth to anus. You can get ulcers and sores in your mouth, your stomach, your small, large intestine. They happen to come in these, what we call Peyer's patches. And so it's your intestine's sort of inflamed in patches like a Dalmatian. It's kind of all over the place, a bit randomized. Well, then there's the colitis, which tends to go more in strips, where it's, say, 18 centimeters of your large intestine. Say we call proctitis is one of the most common. So that's just the lower rectum is inflamed, and it's very surface level. Whereas Crohn's disease goes deep into the tissues. It really burrows into the walls of the intestines.
Welcome to the Radical Health Rebel podcast. I'm your host, Leigh Brandon. This work started for me several decades ago when I started to see the impact I could make on people, helping them to identify the root cause of their health problems that no doctor could figure out, including serious back, knee, shoulder and neck injuries, acne and eczema issues, severe gut health problems, even helping couples get pregnant after several IVF treatments had failed. And it really moves me to be able to help people in this way. And that is why I do what I do and why we have this show. Welcome to this week's episode of the Radical Health Rebel podcast. I'm excited to sit down with Josh Dech, a former paramedic turned holistic nutritionist who is an expert in gut health. Josh has worked with some of the top doctors in the world and has helped his clients reverse complex digestive diseases that were once deemed untreatable. Join us as we dive into the world of gut health and learn how these diseases can be reversed naturally. Stay tuned for an eye-opening conversation that could change the way you think about your health. Josh Dech, welcome to the Radical Health Rebel podcast. Thanks for coming on the show.
Leigh, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to this one.
Yeah, me too, Josh. So to kick things off, could you share perhaps your academic and professional background and what motivated you to specialize in helping people with complex digestive issues?
This is always an interesting topic of discussion. I think everyone sort of has their villain origin story, so to speak. You know, when I look at everyone's sort of origin in the functional medicine world, most of us got here because we had issues ourselves. And so when I was in my late teens, I went back to school, became a paramedic, and I really enjoyed it. I loved doing the work, but it was sick care. You know, it wasn't health care. And so for me, it's not what I wanted to do. And through a chain of events, I ended up getting into personal training. And one of the women I worked with, one of my first clients, we were working together. I was probably 21 years old. And she came in, she was on 57 pills and a shot of insulin for breakfast. She took 17 pills and insulin for bedtime. There's all kinds of nasty stuff going on with her body and her health and her gut. She had high blood pressure, slept with a CPAP machine. She was on disability and all kinds of nonsense. She was 57. We worked on basics, nutrition, lifestyle, all kinds. By the time she turned 59, she was off all but 2 medications. Even at that age, her body healed itself from reverse disease. And then at age 59, she actually broke a world record as a weightlifter in the raw powerlifting division here in Canada.
Wow.
It was incredible. But that to me showed the potential of the human body and what can really be done under the right circumstance. I kind of fell in love with this proactive rather than reactive medicine in paramedics, keeping people barely alive, taken to the hospital for the same drug, same pill, same thing, same problem until they died. They never got better. Their symptoms just got managed. And I thought, well, if people can begin reversing disease at 57 years old, breaking world records and actually becoming extraordinarily fit by 59, what is the capacity of the human body to heal itself? And so I started diving into this more and more. And I, through another chain of events, happy accidents, I call it falling forward, I ended up going back to school. I became a nutritionist, and the people I started working with, everything came back to the gut. If somebody had depression, came back to the gut. Anxiety, the gut. Skin issues, psoriasis, acne, back to the gut. Diabetes, back to the gut. Memory issues, back to the gut. And the pattern continued. And so I started addressing more gut, and people came to see me for irritable bowel syndrome, until one day my first client came to see me for ulcerative colitis asking for help. I said, well, I can try. My knowledge at this time, it's an autoimmune condition. There's nothing that can be done. It is what it is, but I believe the body is capable of healing itself. Let's see what we can do. Well, what we did in 3 months far and above surpassed what she did with her functional medicine doctor in 3 years. So much so that this doctor actually got on a call with me and said, what is it that you guys are doing that we are not? Tell me what you're doing. And we've been working together now for about 1.5 years. That's Dr. Yusuf Salibi. He actually works with the FLCCC. He brought me in as a medical lecturer now. I'm now a physician's consultant for IBD, and it's just blown up from there. We've had 300 cases of Crohn's and colitis now reversed in the last 2 years. And these what are understood to be unfixable, autoimmune, genetic, environmental, unknown cause types of conditions can be fully reversed. And this was my window into understanding that medicine is so wrong in so many ways, that they make assumptions that disease is innate to the human body, but it's not. It's something that the body experiences as a result of dysfunction. But if we fix that dysfunction, the body begins to heal itself. And that's effectively the roundabout way of where or how I've gotten to where we are today with doing what we're doing.
Yeah, the first thing I really want to say to that is it's really refreshing to hear a medical doctor say to someone else who's helped their patient that they couldn't help, say, please tell me what you're doing. Because I'm sure you've come across the situation that I have many times where you've had someone come to you, the doctor hasn't been able to help them, the medical doctor. The client comes to see you, you help them, they recover from whatever it was they had. They go back to their doctor, and their doctor either is completely disinterested in what they did, they just brush it off. Oh, that's good. Keep doing what you're doing. There's no inquisitiveness in terms of, oh, that's really interesting. What did you do? The other response I've heard many times is, the client might say, oh, I did this, this, and this, and now, whatever it is, my skin condition, whatever, has gone away. And the doctor turns around and says, well, it won't be because of that. That's a load of nonsense. Right? And
I got a story for you, Leigh, but keep going.
No, go for it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So, all right. So when I was a little boy, I was probably, 5 years old, 6 years old. My dad tells this story. It's one of his favorites. My cousin and I both went swimming, both got a nasty ear infection. And so my doctor looks at me, and he looks in the left ear, and it's all swollen and red. It's visibly inflamed. And he says, all right, well, we want to get you on some antibiotics. And he looks at my cousin and goes, we'll get you on the antibiotics. My cousin went on the antibiotics. He had this ear infection, lasted almost 2 weeks. My mom went, I'll get a second opinion. She took me down to the homeopathic doctor we've been seeing for a long time, gave me some homeopathic remedies. 2 days, gone. We go back to the doctor. He looks in my ear, looks in the left. Looks in the right ear. You sure we got the right ear? She goes, well, we actually didn't use the antibiotics. We used homeopathy. He goes, oh, that stuff doesn't work. So this is the paradigm we see. At the same instance, I had a client of mine, 17 years she was dealing with ulcerative colitis, up to 50 bowel movements. That's 50 bowel movements per day.
Wow.
Blood and mucus and pain. She compared having a bowel movement sometimes to giving birth, and she's got 3 kids. And so it's been quite severe. Went back to the doctor after working with us for 90 days. It took 3 weeks for her to go from 50 bowel movements to 3 and 5 a day. That's it. It just, sometimes it's that easy. Sometimes it's not. But after a couple of months, she goes back to the doctor. Symptoms are gone after 17 years. His response was that your medication must have finally started working after 17 years. Or the other hand, where I got someone coming back in, her doctor wanted her on an immunosuppressant. See, when we're inflamed, it's your body trying to heal you from something. And so this inflammation persists. This is what causes pain. And she went back to the doctor after 90 days, Crohn's disease gone. No symptoms, no inflammation. She had a CT enterography scan. They scoped. You'd never know she had the disease unless you looked at her chart saying she's got a history of this disease. And her doctor still asked her to go on Entyvio. She says, why? She goes, well, because you have Crohn's. She says, but I don't. I don't have inflammation. I feel fine, but you still have Crohn's. And so this belief, this paradigm that disease is innate to the human body. Once you have it, you have it. There's no healing. There's no reprimand. There's nothing. You're just stuck with it forever. This is a very backwards way of looking at it. And it gets people who are perfectly healthy having medication and immunosuppressive drugs that shut down your immune system, the thing that keeps you healthy, the thing that actually healed you from the sickness you were experiencing. They want to shut it down because the paper says you have a disease. And this is a very dangerous way to do medicine. And it's so backwards. You have people suffering needlessly. But we just need to stop to ask, what is your body trying to heal you from, rather than assuming disease is innate.
Yeah. It's interesting. I have heard stories like that before, and I've heard stories similar as well with people with cancer as well. So they've tried the conventional route. Yeah, it gets better for a while, but it comes back, and it comes back worse. And then they think, right, I'm going to go a different route. They go a different route. Their cancer's gone. They go back for their checkup. They can't find any cancer in their body. And then the doctor says, but we need to give you chemo. And it's like, why? I don't have cancer anymore. Oh, well, just in case.
Just in case. We'll just zap your body and destroy your immune system just in case. It's crazy.
It's crazy, isn't it? I mean, I have a saying that health and disease can't live in the same body. Right?
I like that. It's true.
Yeah.
If you're diseased and your body is in a state of, it literally means, if we go back to the etymology of the word, dis-ease. It's dysfunction, a lack of ease of use and movement. Well, a machine that is properly lubricated, properly built, and it's structured to work well, it doesn't have any dis-ease. It runs smoothly on its own accord because its own systems and checks and balances keep it running in this way. But the minute we create dysfunction, this is when crisis sets in. I mean, we see this all the time. Look at computer systems. They run themselves. There's checks and balances to keep them in check, to make sure it is self-regulating. The minute somebody hacks in or you get a virus or something happens, everything runs amok. But we look at this for computer systems. We don't look at it for human systems. But our immune system is a computer system. It runs checks and balances. It has electrical signals and circuits and messengers and all kinds of things to keep it in check. We just need to understand. Now, there might be someone listening to this going, well, this is really good, but I don't have Crohn's or colitis. We have to understand that disease is a wear and tear and breakdown, right? Imagine you start with a flat on your car, right? Gets a flat tire. Not that big of a deal. You pull over to the side of the road, you fix it, you get up, put the spare on, you're good to go, get it replaced, you're fine. But imagine you run on that flat. Now you keep running and keep running. You run it at high speeds and slow speeds. You're moving around on it. What happens? That tire starts to shred. And then the rim starts to bend. Well, now your car, over time, you keep driving it this way, is going to drive on this 15-degree angle. Now your axle bends. Then it breaks. And that's going to rip through the bottom of your car. Now it's torn apart a bunch of brake lines. Now you got to get your rotors fixed. Like on, and things start to break down. The same thing happens in the body. If we catch dis-ease early, it's just bloat right now. It's just constipation. It's just diarrhea. It's just a little bit of discomfort, a little bit of gas. Well, guess what? It is going to wear and tear and break down like a vehicle that you continue to drive if you don't stop and make the necessary repairs. And we see this all the time in health. We get people in limbo who go to their doctor. And this is, again, the fallacy of Western medicine being remarkably or remotely useful. It's great in emergencies. It's phenomenal. Some of the best in the world, emergency and surgery. When it comes to chronic inflammatory, any kind of inflammatory condition, it's almost criminal. It's so laughably bad. And so you go to the doctor, get people coming in, they go, I don't have a diagnosis yet. My doctor doesn't know what to do. That is literally the definition of it's not broke, don't fix it. They will wait until it's fully broken before they intervene. Imagine you're walking around, Leigh, and you got a pair of shoes and you forgot to wear your socks, and that heel starts to rub and it gets red and it blisters and it starts to bleed. Now, if you catch that early, you go, oh, that shoe's uncomfortable. You take it off. You go to your doctor with that shoe on. They look at that and go, well, come back when your shoe is when your foot's blistering and you got holes in the foot, then we'll fix it. It doesn't make any sense. And this is how we look at, this is what sort of how doctors are trained to look at healthcare. It's really sick care and disease management. And it's very, very backwards.
Yeah, absolutely. So just going back to your personal journey. So you said you started personal training when you were around 20, 21, was it?
Yeah, about that.
And then what age did you start studying nutrition?
About 22.
So not too far after.
No, really early on, right? We figure out that things are connected. You know, from paramedics, I started at 19. When I was 20, I started changing jobs, and I was 21 and I was into personal training. And then by 22, I'm really into movement and mechanics, and even like studying under chiropractors and physiotherapists. I went to some of the top chiropractors in the city and said, can I shadow? Like, they work with the NHL teams. I said, can I just sit and learn? And so I got to learn the mechanical dysfunction and the neurological dysfunction, and how one kink in your neck or one inhibition, like a compression of some nerves, pain or no pain, can dampen signals, causing the rest of your body to fall apart. Your ankle can be coming from your neck, or your carpal tunnel syndrome can be coming from your shoulder, right? It's so many things are connected. And this is where I really started diving into the holistic, we'll say the global, the integrative, what's the word I'm looking for? Not integrative, the internal medicine, or the study of internal medicine, is how the whole body is connected as one unit. And so I started diving into this, and this is where I got more into the nutrition and nutrients and vitamins and minerals and cellular health, and then immune health, and then disease processes. And it brought back paramedics who were dealing about pathophysiology, or the breakdown, the study of the breakdown or disease of the body. And everything started to come together. Now here I am, mid-20s, back to school as a nutritionist. And I thought, there's something to this. And now here we are. I've been blessed enough to work with some of the top doctors in the world. I've had on my show that I've worked with. I'm now a consult for, or have the opportunity to learn from and educate as well. It's just been a really cool circle. But it's rare doctors are willing to lean in, but these ones are. Not all doctors are bad. I'm not trashing doctors, but the medical system as a whole, I have very little respect for.
Yeah, I do completely agree with you. Unfortunately, there's a lot of financial incentives for doctors not to do what's best for the patient, but what's best for the profit margin. Unfortunately, and it's sad that there are a lot of doctors that are quite happy to do what makes the most money rather than actually what's best for the patient. So in terms of, again, going back to your journey, one of the things you said right at the beginning was, a lot of us that come through and start doing the work that we do have actually gone on our own personal journey in terms of, having health problems. Did you have any health problems yourself?
I did. And so when I was growing up, I had gut issues my entire life. My dad had gut issues, my mom had gut issues. And I remember I was probably 11-ish, give or take years old. And she had bowel issues her whole life. She always, a lot of gas and a lot of bloating, a lot of pain. And we got home one day, we went out for McDonald's. And that was just the nail in the coffin. We went home and she was, we went upstairs. She was having a lot of gut pain. She was laying on her left side. And she was trying to let this gas pass like she normally would, and she'd let it go. And my stepdad at the time, he says, this just seems a little bit worse than it normally is. Like, we should probably get this looked at. My mom hates the hospital. She hates doctors, hates ambulances, and make her sick. She wouldn't go. He said, okay, I'll come back and check on you. Comes back an hour later and she's getting sicker and she's feeling worse. And a couple hours pass and he gets up there and she's on her side and she's in pain and she's sweating. He goes, we're going to the hospital. No. He says, we're going. And he picked her up, put her in the car, drove her himself because she wouldn't take an ambulance. And they got in that night. They did emergency surgery because it turns out she actually perforated or developed a hole in her large intestine because that wear and tear, right? That heel in a shoe, it blistered and bled and it opened up a wound, and that colon started leaking bowel contents, so stool and bacterium and all kinds, into her abdominal cavity, getting to all of her other organs. It was leaking inside of this closed container. She was going septic. And the doctor had said, the surgeon did emergency surgery, took out 18 inches of bowel, put in a mesh, big, like cut her top to bottom, ribs to belly button, or ribs to pubic bone, and opened her up and did some surgery there. But he said, had we not operated another couple of hours, and you would have died at home that night because it was so toxic. And so that's that personal history that I've got, seeing that happen to her and going into the hospital and watching her post-op, like just looking gray and kind of two-dimensional and sick. And then I had gut issues. I was 14. I was getting joint pain. I was having acne in my late teens, early 20s. The acne was up my back, my neck, covering like every square inch. There wasn't an inch on my back that didn't have acne on it, down my arms. I dealt with that for many years. And doctor said, well, it's just acne. We'll give you Accutane. Or, well, it's just IBS. There's nothing we can do. Until I discovered, going through my own studies as now a middle-aged boy man at 25 years old trying to figure things out, that I've actually got a massive candida infection. I've got a bunch of conditions going on. That candida is pushing through my skin. My drainage pathways are blocked. My gallbladder, my bile ducts, fatty foods are causing problems, until it got its absolute worst with this blood in the stool. I was having at my worst, I was having 15 plus bowel movements a day, 10-minute transit times. I would eat, things would come out whole. It's like I chewed it and then spit it into the toilet is what it looked like, because I was not digesting. I was not absorbing. My digestive tract was just an empty tube. Things would flush right through. And so I've been there at that worst, and I've seen how bad it can get. And even like now, issues are coming up because I've had so much damage done. It's going to take so many years to repair, really. But I'm out now. I'll give you an example, Leigh. When I was at like peak conditioning, it didn't help. I was running steroids at the time. I was a strength athlete competing in strongman. If you want to compete, you do gear. You give yourself injections. That made my gut even worse. And so for me, I went from picking up like 500, 600 pound deadlifts. I was picking up 375 pound like Atlas stones, these big sphere rocks you see strongmen doing. I'd pick them up, and I was the only guy under 220 pounds competing at these weights. Like I was 185, 95 pounds rolling with guys who are 220, 230. I was strong. When I got sick, picking up 50 pounds was heavy. and I was just exhausted all the time. I wanted to sleep. I couldn't think. ADHD, anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts through the roof. My neurotransmitters, my brain chemistry was a mess. And I had to go back and figure out like what is happening to my insides. And this is where I started to shift in my mid-20s to understand that there's more to this. And I started to heal my own gut. And it's been a journey, but that's what most practitioners in the functional medicine space have their own villain origin story, if you will. So that's sort of my personal history there.
Yeah. Do you know, it's really interesting because I originally became a personal trainer, and 2 years later I started studying nutrition. and I'm going to apologize to my listeners because they might have heard this story before, but I want to share my story because it's not that dissimilar from yours.
Please.
So I was actually born with pyloric stenosis. So I was operated on at 6 weeks old. And it's weird because I look back now and I'm starting to put the dots together because I didn't realize kind of the sequence of events that kind of were probably linked. Well, at 2 years old, I was hospitalized with gastroenteritis. Now I'm thinking, well, was that anything to do with having, reasonably major, it's life-saving surgery at 6 weeks old? Having abdominal surgery, could that have had anything to do with it? Maybe, maybe not. So then I was hospitalized with gastroenteritis age 2. And then my entire childhood and until I was about 30, 31, I thought it was normal for a bowel movement to take 30 minutes. I didn't know any different. And the first time I ever thought, even at the time, I didn't think there was still anything different. But the first time it was ever questioned, I was at work one day and I went and had a bowel movement. So, I was away for half an hour from my desk and I got back and my boss said, "Where have you been?" And I said, "I've been to the toilet." And he said, "But you've been gone half an hour." And I said, "Yeah." I thought that was normal, and he didn't, he kind of said, "Well, that's not normal." And I kind of shrugged it off as if to say, "Well, no, yeah, it is normal." So that was my, all through my childhood. And it wasn't to say I had bowel movements every day, but they weren't what they should have been. They were hard to pass. They were dark. They were smelly. That tells you something's wrong, right? It shouldn't be like that. And at the age of 13, I got acne, and it sounds pretty much the same as yours: face, chest, back, And it wasn't until 18 years later that I learned enough from my education to actually put it right. And what was quite, again, another synchronicity with you, when I originally went and got tested, I had a candida overgrowth, right? So I had all sorts of food sensitivities, and literally I went on an elimination diet. I went on an antifungal protocol, and within 2 weeks everything cleared up.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Right. And it really makes me sad because I don't know if you know, but I've written a book on acne.
Yeah, I see it behind you there.
Yeah, and I often pop onto social media groups, acne kind of social media groups, and everyone's asking the wrong question. Like, how long should I be on this drug until it starts to have an effect? Or even if they start going down the right direction, it will be, "Oh, but I tried bone broth, it didn't work." It's like, you're asking the wrong questions,
We're conditioned to cover our symptoms, right? We're conditioned. I get people all the time, "Well, what herb should I take? What supplement should I take?" I'm like, unless you have this end goal in mind where you go, "Okay, I'm going to take this herb, this supplement, this thing because this is attacking my root cause," you're just masking your symptoms. So now you're on plant-based medication.
Yeah.
And it's no different. It's still the dependency.
Yeah.
Because your body is dysfunctional.
Yeah, it's still an allopathic approach, isn't it? Rather than dealing with the root cause, you're just doing probably a better way of doing allopathic medicine, which probably still won't get to the root cause anyway.
Absolutely agree.
So that's interesting. We've got quite a lot of synchronicity going on there. I just want to go back a little bit because there's a few things you mentioned I want to kind of dive into a bit more detail. So could you explain what irritable bowel syndrome or IBS is, but also what inflammatory bowel disease is, or IBD, and what the differences are between the two. When 35-year-old Amanda first scheduled to see me, she'd been suffering for 19 years from severe IBS, diarrhea, and fecal incontinence, along with abdominal pain and bloating. Her condition had not only made life uncomfortable for Amanda, but very inconvenient as she had to walk 2 hours to work every day along a route that had public toilets, and she'd never been on holiday as an adult because of her condition. The only advice that several doctors and specialists had given Amanda was to take Imodium, and when she first saw me, she was taking 5 Imodium a day and wasn't getting any better. To help Amanda, I ran tests to find out what foods were right for her metabolic type, to see which foods she was sensitive to, and to assess her gut microbiome. Tests showed that Amanda had several food sensitivities and a parasite infection. Over the coming weeks, I coached Amanda to eat right of her type and to replace the foods she was sensitive to, and a protocol to deal with her parasite infection. And after 3 months, Amanda was IBS-free, and she also reported her skin was much improved and she had lost weight. And she booked a holiday for her and her husband to New York, as they'd never been on a proper honeymoon because of her IBS. And if you're suffering like Amanda was, and you want to get to the root cause of your problem, you can arrange a consultation with me at www.bodycheck.co.uk. And if we're a good fit, I could help you achieve the same kind of results as Amanda. Now, back to the podcast.
This is an interesting question, and you teed it up really well, I think. So we look at irritable bowel syndrome. There's 2 lenses to look at these. Again, there's the Western lens, like the allopathic, standardized Western medical lens, and then the functional medicine lens. In the Western lens, irritable bowel syndrome and inflammatory bowel disease are 2 different things. Irritable bowel syndrome, not really classified with inflammation, but a lot of symptoms: bloating, pain, constipation, diarrhea, whatever it might be, food sensitivities, etc. That's irritable bowel syndrome, where things can irritate you. Maybe you got rapid transit time. You got to watch what you eat. That's the syndrome. But then there's inflammatory bowel disease, which has inflammation. You have inflammatory markers. You can get ulcers in the colon. That's inflammatory bowel disease has 2 branches. You have Crohn's disease, which is anything from mouth to anus. You can get ulcers and sores in your mouth, your stomach, your small, large intestine. They happen to come in these, what we call Peyer's patches. And so it's your intestine's sort of inflamed in patches like a Dalmatian. It's kind of all over the place, a bit randomized. Well, then there's the colitis, which tends to go more in strips, where it's, say, 18 centimeters of your large intestine. Say we call proctitis is one of the most common. So that's just the lower rectum is inflamed, and it's very surface level. Whereas Crohn's disease goes deep into the tissues. It really burrows into the walls of the intestines. And so then you have your Crohn's disease, mouth to anus, deep. Then you have your surface level colitis, large intestine. And then you have your ulcerative colitis, where again, like your heel wearing in a shoe, rubs until it's red, blisters, and bleeds. So you have these degrees of colitis where there's ulcers or not, but it's all inflamed. And both of these can have symptoms of pain, blood, mucus, diarrhea, constipation, food sensitivities, all kinds of things. Now, when I look at these, my personalized definition, this is where I think we really broken the mold, or broken what was being molded in Western medicine to change our ideology behind bowel disease. Western medicine has spent a lot of time differentiating, saying IBS and IBD are dramatically different. But something like 17% of all IBD cases, so your Crohn's and colitis diagnoses, the ones who are seen and treated with a label by a doctor, 17% of them have a previous diagnosis of IBS. Well, that's a diagnosis, but we know a lot of things go undiagnosed. For example, we got people, if we look at the stats from North America, right, we'll use the USA as an example for the CDC, lots of data there. Up to 72% of all Americans, depending on the sample size, 60 to 72%, will complain of having some kind of gut issue once a week. So constipation, diarrhea, gas, bloat, pain, something of the sort. That's their complaint. Now, out of that 72%, so we got 350 plus million Americans. So let's say there's 270 million of them complaining of some kind of gut issue. Well, a much smaller percentage actually has an IBS diagnosis. And so if we look at statistically, how many people actually have a diagnosis of IBS, and then how many go from IBS to IBD, it's not hard to draw the conclusion that someone can progress from IBS to IBD, diagnosed or not, relatively quickly, back to the wear and tear. So my hypothesis was, I don't think IBD is this random condition. It's not this thing that comes out of the blue, Crohn's and colitis. It's the people who start today with a little bit of acid reflux, a little bit of discomfort. What does their doctor do? Well, they give them antacids. Well, what do antacids do? They suppress acid. Well, the number one cause in my practice I see of acid reflux is actually low stomach acid. I got another episode on that to dive into it. But the short of it is your sphincters are controlled by pressure and acid. If you don't have it, you get reflux because they open up. And so you come in, you got bloat, acid reflux. You go to your doctor and you get antacids. Well, now you're not digesting, breaking down, and absorbing properly. You get undigested food coming through the intestines. It causes a bit of hyperfermentation. Those sphincters open up. So now you get bacteria flowing back and forth uncontrolled. Now your assembly line is not in check and balance. You're starting to get the products at the end of an assembly line you don't want because things aren't done properly. And so at the end of the day, you get people who now have gut issues. They now have more bloat because bacteria is getting in there. They now have more dysfunction. They have fungal overgrowth. They have dysfunction because they're not breaking down, digesting, absorbing. So their nutrients are now depleted. And now they go back to their doctor. Things are getting worse. Maybe they do or don't get a diagnosis of IBS. Maybe they just take over-the-counter prescriptions or medications for the next 15 years until one day they're like, oh, I got blood in my stool. I better see a doctor. Most men will wait a year before going to the doctor with blood in their stool. And they go in now and they go, oh, it's ulcerative colitis or it's Crohn's disease. You must have had this the entire time. It just finally got worse. And so what did we do is we went in and said, well, your heel is blistering. You must have always had this blister, but the shoe probably had nothing to do with it. They will say your diet had nothing to do with it. The medication had nothing to do with it. We just look at this like it's this arbitrary condition, but it doesn't make any sense. We can clearly see the breakdown in the process. And what I did is I went, okay, what if IBS and IBD are the same? Because the symptoms are almost identical. It's just a matter of severity, right? What was happening in your shoe changes the progression. You get somebody with glass and sand in their shoe. The shoe is wet. There's no socks. The shoe is too small. You're going to blister quicker than someone with a good fitting shoe. That makes sense, right? And so I said, what if IBS and IBD are the same thing? What if it's just a progressive wear and tear? And lo and behold, we got people going back in history. Many of them have this wear and tear where I'll have my gallbladder removed. And then I got IBS. And over 15 years, I finally got colitis. Or you get people, on the other hand, who were sick or previously healthy, who got very sick very quickly, a couple of days, weeks, or months. They went from being perfectly healthy to having blood on the stool. And the doctor goes, well, it's genetic. It finally caught up to you. No. That has to be an infection or something that the doctors aren't looking for. Most of them believe that parasites are a third world problem. Well, 60% of our clients right now are passing parasites every single day in the Crohn's colitis protocols, every day. And so we have to understand that your doctor, as much education as they have, may not be privy to other pieces of education they don't have. Just because your doctor's a doctor doesn't mean they know everything. Just because they say it's one way doesn't mean it can't be another, right? You get an artist or a musician. You say, hey, I want you to create a song for me. They go, great. It's all rock and roll. You're like, but I want something classical. I want a little bit of hip hop. I want a little bit of something smooth. Give me some jazz funk. Well, that doesn't work. This is the best option because they love rock and roll. That's what they know. This is what your doctor understands is this genre of medicine. And so for them to go outside of it is foreign. But because we're taught that our doctors are doctors and our doctor must know everything, we somehow assume that if they don't know it, if they say it can't be done, it can't be done. Well, how do you think other genres of music got there? From people looking at it differently. And this is what we have to look at for medicine.
Yeah. It's interesting looking at IBS. A friend of mine wrote a book on H. pylori, and he said that IBS is intestinal BS because if you get a diagnosis of IBS, it's still not actually telling you anything, is it really? Because
it doesn't tell you anything.
It could be IBS could be so many different things in itself.
Now, on the other hand, you got some really famous doctors out there like Kiran Krishnan, absolutely brilliant, functional medicine, works in IBS. And there are some causes of IBS we're still figuring out, but we know gut issues are on the rise. And this is where it comes into play. Okay, well, is it a migrating motor complex, really the power supply that powers your assembly line? Is that what's making it too fast or too slow and causing bacteria to overgrow? We do have SIBO, right? So small intestinal bacterial overgrowth can often be parasites because they mess with those valves and those control mechanisms. So things kind of come and go freely. We have what's called autoimmune SIBO or small intestinal overgrowth, where through a process of what's called molecular mimicry, maybe somebody gets food poisoning. They eat it. The body detects this bacterium It's got a certain protein structure that looks very similar to things your body actually produces in the intestine. And so now it begins attacking itself through molecular mimicry. That's another thing we see. But we have to understand that a healthy body does not suddenly become allergic to itself. There has to be some kind of underlying inflammatory condition. And so you have these amazing doctors in the world of IBS doing amazing work. But I think even they might have something else to learn, as do I. I'm always learning. Every week I learn something new that changes my thoughts or my patterns. And as long as we as practitioners can remain open to the next step or the next thing coming in, even though I don't know it, understand it, or maybe even agree with it, maybe there's a nugget in there I can pull. I'm not afraid to listen to a book where I already know 75% of it. But if I'm going to learn 25% new stuff, that's amazing. And it will reshift my paradigm, helping me help people better. And so I'm with you. IBS is kind of one of those conditions where it's symptomatic of dysfunction. Can we identify the dysfunction every time? Maybe, maybe not. But I mean, we're 95+% successful within 16 weeks of getting people to reverse Crohn's and colitis, the worst of the worst gut disease. And we're now just starting to help people even more so with other health conditions and gut conditions like IBS or GERD and acid reflux, because those are predisposing factors to these major conditions. If we can help them, we can help you too. If we can rebuild an entire house, we can probably fix your cabinets or straighten your door. You know what I mean? And that's what we're looking at for the spectrum of health here. We can help the worst of the worst, which means there's hope for everyone. We just have to have a different lens. And the truth is, I can't help everyone, but there's a lot of people we can help. And there are other people in my circle who can help conditions I can't, and vice versa. And as a community, if we can learn to work together, everyone can get better, and disease could really become a thing of the past. But the truth is, it's an uphill battle. And so I'm kind of droning on here. I'll give you one quick frame of reference. I did a lecture recently on the natural reversals of IBD. I did this for a functional medicine academy for a group of doctors. And I was like, here's how we're reversing it now. And this year I'm doing another lecture this fall, and it's actually more advanced than what I did last year because we've learned more. And so we're taking it further. But look at the stats. We know that 17% of people with IBD or Crohn's colitis had a previous IBS diagnosis. We also know that up to 72% of Americans complain of some kind of gut issue at least once a week. So we can see the spectrum where it can progress from bloat to IBS. We have to look at disease now. So the far end of the progression, things have gotten as bad as they can be, about to be worse, whether surgeries or cancers or something else. Back in 1990, according to the CDC, depending on the data sets you look at, there was 1.5 to 3 million global cases of IBD, so Crohn's colitis, being treated actively by a doctor. 1.5 to 3 million. In 2020, it's north of 7 million. Here in 2024, it's estimated to be almost 8 million. So we had this exponential curve of growth of people developing bowel disease who've gone up anywhere from 3 to 5 times the amount. What's happened in that time? Sugar, fast food, antibiotic consumption, alcohol consumption, junk food consumption. We look at pesticide consumption. There were 700 to 900 pesticides acceptable for use in 1990. It's almost 17 to 19,000 today. 50% more toxic pesticides in North America known to cause issues with DNA, genetics, hormones, the works, than are allowed in the UK. Look at the food ingredients. McDonald's in the UK, you go get, even though I don't love canola oil and vegetable oil, it's oil, potatoes, and salt. In America, there's 17 ingredients. A Big Mac has something like 58 ingredients to make the bun and the cheese and the meat and all these artificial ingredients. We're eating frankenfood. And so what your body eats, breaks down, digests, and absorbs is what it becomes. If you eat fake food, you will develop fake health conditions, I'll call them, for lack of a better term. You develop dysfunction that should never be in a healthy body, but it's being fed dysfunctional food. So what's it going to produce is dysfunction, and dysfunction becomes disease.
Yeah, I would just add to that as well, that there's an ever increasing number of, let's call them injectables, that are being pumped into humans as well these days. I mean, they had the monopoly on children for a long time, but obviously since 2021 or the end of 2020, they started injecting a lot of adults as well, which I knew they'd been planning for a long time, which is why I tried to warn a lot of people. But fortunately, all I got was abuse for trying to warn people about that.
Yes.
But that's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah. And it's not one of those things you want to come back and go, told you so, because it doesn't help anyone.
No.
But the reality is that's exactly what happened. There are all kinds of now creators or providers of said stabby stabs, who have now gone out and retracted and said, yep, well, it turns out they do cause all these diseases and these problems and death and blood clots. And the Toronto Children's Hospital now last year came out with a commercial about heart attacks in kids and what to do, as if heart disease and heart attacks in children has ever in history been a normal thing. And so it is pretty wild. And I commend you for being one of the very few who stood up and said, no, this doesn't make sense. This is wrong.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't want to go too much down the rabbit hole, but if you think of anything that stimulates the immune system and it's never been done before, would it be any wonder that it might cause an overreaction of the immune system?
It's true. We're seeing a lot of that. And in many ways, I mean, you get people coming in with inflammation. Well, what does that do? If you take a look at my glass of water, right? Somebody in your average day-to-day with no diagnosed disease might have a half glass of water with a little drain in the bottom. During the day, you put a little bit in, but the same amount falls out. So there's this chronic low-grade inflammation. You're prone to getting sick. Some days you're doing really good. You get more rest. You're eating healthy. You're out in the sun more. You're exercising. And you empty a little more water from that glass. But most of us have this chronic inflammation. There's a little bit of water sloshing around in there at all times. But then we get people coming in who have a really full glass. It's like when you fill a glass of water so much, the water sort of bubbles on the top. In one tap, one drop, one extra thing, it falls over the edge. This is where disease comes into play, or people get really bad. Well, my gut really flared up right now. Or we call in Crohn's colitis a flare, where you went from kind of inflamed to super inflamed. Well, the challenge is we get people trying to balance their glasses out. They're trying to boost their immune system all the time. Well, if you already have this major imbalance in your immune system, like you picture one of those old school scales where you have the weights that come down, right? Now it's teetering like a teeter-totter. You want to boost your immune system, you can be pushing this teeter-totter further, making things worse, where your immune system now continues to overreact and we get more issues and more problems on the back end. Rather than rejuvenating the immune system, bringing it back to balance so that ride doesn't have these big bumps, high lefts or high rights, it's actually nice and smooth and it can take care of itself. And what that does, it allows us to open the bottom of this glass that's half full or fully full. We create a bigger drain plug. So as things come in, they drain out as quickly as they come in. You have empty drainage pathways. Your gallbladder, your liver. Gallbladder and liver are a huge part of disease process and gut disease, of people having blockages and recycling toxins. Your lymphatics, your kidney, your bloodstream, your lungs, your skin, how we detox all these toxins in our body. As we get these to start to develop and they can start to clean themselves out, more disease can come into this glass, but it empties out faster than it comes in. This is how we continue to maintain health. There are different mechanisms that can do that, like angiogenesis, secretion of blood, DNA, immune cells. They keep us constantly in check and balance. They keep the bottom of that glass empty. So when water comes in to fill up to create disease, we empty it quicker than it can create disease. But most of us have a glass half full or 2/3 full. We're chronically low-grade inflamed, and the drainage plug in the bottom is so junked up that we're overflowing or constantly filling over. And we get these diagnoses, we get the acne, we get the joint pain, we get the brain fog, we get the thyroid issues, and we wonder why it's happening. And it comes back to what's filling your glass and how well you're able to drain. And what's filling the glass could be food. It could be antibiotics. It could be stress. It could be pesticides. It could be environmental toxins. It can be a million and one different things. And this is where we start getting into the individuality of medicine. There's a blanket where we can get people, best case scenario, we run around naked in the woods and we don't get bit by anything and we live in the sun and eat off the land. And that's perfect. But we don't live that way. And so individually, what interventions do we need to take to reverse and prevent many of these diseases? And this is, I believe, what's ultimately made us so incredibly successful in the gut disease realm of Crohn's colitis. People with what's considered an autoimmune, genetic, unfigureoutable cause of disease, you just have this thing now to reverse sometimes very quickly. I got dozens of stories we could tell you about people reversing this disease and finding the root cause. And it can be done. Everyone needs to know, no matter where you are on the gut health spectrum, it can be fixed and the medications aren't going to do it.
Yeah. I guess it's probably a good time to maybe discuss, what are some of the things, I mean, you kind of mentioned just now, improving the detoxification pathways is one thing. But what other things can people do that are suffering from, quite severe digestive issues? Julie, a 47-year-old who works in computer sales, came to see me complaining of lifelong irritable bowel syndrome, which included severe abdominal pain and bloating, loose and very frequent stools, along with hot flushes, menstrual brain fog, and low energy, which affected her work performance. After taking a comprehensive history, plus running some labs, I discovered that Julie had a parasite infection, which may have been causing the loose stools, a methane-producing bacterial overgrowth that was almost certainly causing the abdominal bloating and pain, a leaky gut, low levels of digestive enzymes, as well as eating too many high oxalate foods on her vegetarian diet. So Julie reduced the high oxalate foods from her diet, plus she took a broad-spectrum antimicrobial supplement to help with the parasites and the bacteria in her gut, probiotics to increase her good bacteria and help repair her gut lining. She also took prebiotics to help feed the commensal bacteria, digestive enzymes to improve her digestion, and herbs to help clear the toxic lipopolysaccharides from her system produced by the overgrowth of gram-negative bacteria. At the end of the program, Julie reported that her health had never been better. In her own words, the improvement is staggering. The abdominal pain and bloating was gone. Her stools were back to normal. Her energy was up. She no longer had brain fog or hot flashes, and her immune system had improved as she no longer suffered from frequent bugs and colds. If you're suffering like Julie was and you want to get to the root cause of your problem, you can arrange a consultation with me at bodycheck.co.uk. That's BODYCHEK. And if we're a good fit, I could help you achieve the same kind of results as Julie. Now, back to the podcast.
Let's start with the most basic that you've talked about 1,000 times on this show. Eating, right? Now, we often talk about what we're eating, and that one I'm going to leave to be because we all at this point, if you're here listening to this show, you've heard more than one episode, you've been online, you've done any basic amount of third grade research, you'll know that what you eat matters. Even though, get this one, Leigh, in the world of gut disease, Crohn's colitis, most doctors will tell you, eat whatever you want. It has no bearing on this disease. It doesn't matter, which is shocking because we know that your gut health is directly responsible from what you eat. But if you're eating anything you want, even though maybe your food didn't specifically create the disease, it will contribute to the severity of your disease. And it will be a much more miserable time if you're eating poorly. So we know what to eat. Let's talk about how we eat. Most of us are pelicans, right? We eat on the go. We one gulp, swallow, and down the hatch it goes. We don't chew. We're running around. Our rest and digest mechanisms are shut off because we're on the go. We're in fight or flight. You got 6 kids. You shove them in the car. You go to soccer practice, grab something in the drive-thru, drop it down the hatch so your belly's full. You get out the door. We're not slowing down. Even the simple process of touching your food, cooking your food, smelling your food, chewing your food, stimulates, it turns on that assembly line to stimulate digestive juices, to get saliva flowing, to get your stomach turning, to get digestive juices and digestive enzymes flowing. It gets the assembly line in order so the end product is a nice healthy stool where it comes out very easily. It's one wipe and you're done. It's fully formed and not horribly smelly. It's just a poop. That's it. And so we have so much dysfunction from how we're eating. We could take it another step further. I'll go into the gut disease space. In Crohn's and colitis, we have really what we've distilled it down to. There are 3 main ways we get Crohn's and colitis. And this is what I'm doing my lecture on coming up here. There's 3 ways we create or we develop Crohn's and colitis. And there are 3 things that make it become autoimmune. So we develop like an autoimmune version of this disease. So the first one we have to look at, and this isn't just Crohn's colitis, again, it's a spectrum. What is in your shoe causing your foot to blister? The more things you have compromising the shoe, the fit, the color, the dryness, the size, shape, glass, sand, this can develop what injury you get in your foot. This is how it works inside of the gut. So the first thing we have, Leigh, is actually toxins. Now, I don't know if I can actually share my screen with you. I actually have a diagram I can show you to explain this. Let me see. I'll present it on my screen. Share screen. Okay, here we go. This will be fun. Let me see. Here we go. Okay. So for those watching online, can you see my screen, Leigh?
There we go.
Amazing. Okay. So this is what we have here as the 3 causes of gut disease. Now, this is for IBD, but anywhere on the spectrum, depending on severity, depending on your drainage in your glass. So the first thing is toxins. That's what we're talking about, environmental. Is it chemicals? Is it pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, rodenticides, any kind of side? Is it your deodorants and perfumes mucking up hormones? Is it chemicals and plastic and all these forever chemicals we're seeing? Or is it one thing we commonly see in bowel disease is mold toxins. We call them mycotoxins. These toxins accumulate inside of the body, leading to dysfunction in your systems. The second one we see is microbial imbalances. Now we know our gut bacteria. When we're born, Leigh, we are 99% human cells, 1% of us is microbes, maybe less, right? When you come through the birth canal, when you get inoculated through breast milk, all this starts to cover you and seed bacteria. And when we die, we are 90% microbes and only 10% human. And so these microbes are everything. We have fungi, we have viruses, we have bacteria, we have parasites, all these little critters that make us us. We're 10 to 1. We are more bacteria and microbes than we are human cells. When these become imbalanced, we see a problem. And now in the microbe world of Crohn's colitis, the common ones we see are parasites. We see fungi or candida or other fungal overgrowths, and even Clostridia, which is a specific strain. Many of you might know of C. diff infections or Clostridium difficile. It's under the umbrella of Clostridia, and these are the microbes we see driving the problems. The next one we see is diet and nutrients. So, of course, what you're eating, how you're eating, and how much nutrients you have. If I look at it like inflammation around the body, your immune system are the firefighters, right? They're the factory workers. They're the workers to do the job. Well, your workers can't do their job without tools. That's the vitamins and minerals and nutrients they need to do the job to create the outcome. Well, if you have toxins in the body, you are burning through these nutrients at an increased rate. Your body is burning through the tools. If you're a firefighter using water, nutrients, and vitamins to put out fires, inflammation, you're burning through it at an increased rate. If you're running on well water, everybody is. We don't have an unlimited supply. You have a storage in your body. So you have well water. Well, if you're trying to put out a fire, you're burning through your vitamins and minerals, your nutrients at an increased rate. You're also inflamed in the gut. So you're not breaking down, digesting, absorbing, and replenishing that well. You're going to be running dry at all times. And so we have toxins leading to gut issues. This is anybody from bloat to bleeding. Toxins, microbial imbalances, and dietary or nutrient issues. When we look at the inside circles of this Venn diagram, for those of you watching, you can see it here. For those of you listening, this is a Venn diagram. We have 3 circles: toxins, microbes, and nutrient deficiencies. Well, the overlapping areas we have now are triggers. So toxins and microbes can lead to elevated stress responses, hormone imbalances, other things. I don't mean stress as in, well, I had a bad day at work. That's part of it. Environmental stress, immune stress, dietary stress. Exercise is stress. It's a use stress, so a good stress, not a distress, a bad stress, but it's all stress. Did you have a death in the family, a horrible trauma that happened to you? Was there, maybe you gave birth? That's another trigger we see. 8 years of medical school. These can be triggers. Well, having toxins and microbe issues and nutrient issues contribute to these overstimuli of triggers. And this becomes the straw that broke the camel's back. The next one we look at is genetics. These are the factors that create autoimmune disease. Now, your doctor might tell you, well, your disease you're dealing with is just genetic. Your mom's got it, your dad's got it, your grandparents had it. It's genetic. Well, genetics are the weak link. When you pull on a chain, it breaks at the weak link. And if your genetics dictate you get inflammation in this way, you will have that. You can get 3 people in a room who all get the same mold exposure. One develops asthma, one develops arthritis, and one develops bowel disease because their weak link said you're going to get this disease when you become inflamed or when you become toxic, when you have breakdown. That's the chain that breaks. So someone coming in to see me who has a gut disease, it's Crohn's or colitis, that's just genetic. My mom had it, my dad had it. Well, great. It doesn't mean you're guaranteed to get it. The saying goes, genetics load the gun, something like lifestyle or something else pulls the trigger. And so your genetics might have been exploited by toxins or nutrient deficiencies. This is the study we call nutrigenomics, where your nutrients actually change the expression or turning up or the turning down of these genetics. Toxins can exploit genetic expression. Even your microbes can have a role to play in how your body expresses genetic function or dysfunction. And so your genetics themselves are not going to say you have this disease. There are imbalances that are pulling on the chain, causing this to break, and now you express this problem. And that's another way we see autoimmune development. The third leg of autoimmune disease is leaky gut. Well, toxins create inflammation, nutrients we need to repair the gut, and microbial imbalances, again, part of our main things that cause diseases, lead to inflammation and leaky gut. Well, you're going to be hard pressed to find anyone, nearly 100% of people dealing with autoimmune disease are going to have a leaky gut issue, a microbial issue, a toxic issue, or a nutrient problem. And so this is where you have to start to understand that there's a lot more to the puzzle than just this genetic condition or just this random condition. It's toxins, microbes, and nutrients that lead to inflammatory conditions or disease expression. It's triggers, genetics, and leaky gut that lead to autoimmune disease. And this is where we start to develop our problems. And this is where your doctors get so wrong. They're addressing the symptom, the expression of disease, the inflammation you're experiencing. What they're not doing is diving in and saying, okay, well, let's heal your root cause. What are the things that led to this dysfunction? What are the things that created your disease? What is the thing your body is inflaming and reacting to? And how do we heal that? Perfect analogy would be, I get this pen stuck in my hand, I trip and fall. And I leave it there, Leigh, for 6-8 months. And it's swollen and it's infected and it's bleeding. And I go to the doctor and they look at me and they're like, Josh, I'm going to give you some numbing cream for the pain. It's the best we can do. Your hand's just inflamed. It's fine. So Godspeed, best of luck, to send me home. I look at him sideways like they got 3 heads. Like, clearly my body's reacting to something. I can visibly see this pen stuck in my hand. My hand's infected because this foreign body is in there. My hand didn't just become inflamed on its own. We can recognize this and the insanity of getting numbing cream instead of pulling the pen out on an external wound or an external injury, an external infection. But when it comes to chronic internal inflammation, we go, well, it just is. You just have this condition now. We don't bother to look for the pen. And this is where the insanity of Western medicine is. I just laid out for you 6 ways that describe all gut disease. You will not find something, at least in my current experience or understanding of this disease, with such a remarkable reversal rate that there's any other way someone gets this disease process. It doesn't fit. There's always something that infected or a foreign body that your body's reacting to. And that's how we find the roots of disease to ultimately let your body heal itself.
Yeah. Yeah, that was great. Now, I know it's impossible if I said to you, right, what are the key things to do? Because there are so many different things and everybody's different. So could you perhaps give us a couple of examples of patients you work with, what process you went through, and what the ultimate results were at the end of the day?
Absolutely. So in my experience, what we look at now is that symptomatology, or the study of your symptoms, what your body is physically producing as a symptom, that trumps testing much of the time. Like parasite testing, not super accurate. They hide in gut lining, they hide in muscle, they really burrow, they're hard to get, they make enzymes that break themselves down. So to try to do a parasite test and get a stool test, for example, you might not be detecting them. But if your symptoms clearly scream to me, you've got parasites, then we have to go and do parasites. But parasites are interesting because they will physically block your drainage pathways we talked about earlier. So they will physically block your bile ducts. They will block your liver detox pathways. They hang out like the ileocecal valve. That's where your small and large intestine connect. If you've got SIBO, it can be a parasite issue blocking up the valve and causing inflammation and letting things kind of come in and out. And this is where we see these conditions developing. Everything's got a root. So we look at symptoms. And there are many, we can go, they've got 40, 50 different symptoms of parasites you can have, fungus, and the work. So we can get into that if you want. But ideally, what we look at is, number one, are you draining properly? If not, why? Do we have to promote drainage? Because if I can get somebody in, I have a fella right now. Again, same thing, ulcerative colitis, diagnosed, blood, mucus, urgency, food sensitivities. We got in, started on diet, lifestyle, got some toxins and junk out of his body, started addressing his fungal issues. He was feeling really good. He was almost better, like almost perfect. That's one layer. So if you look at it like a stack of paper, you pull off one piece of paper, you're lower to the bottom. The bottom is where health is going to sit. But all these pieces of paper are symptoms and inflammatory things causing your body to be inflamed. So he pulled off one piece of paper. He was feeling much better. He's like, oh, I don't have urgency. My food's better. My diet's better. My energy's better. I don't have the pain. My blood's almost gone. I said, amazing. We're doing really, really well. What started to happen is his immune system now had, we'll say, resources to divert, and he started getting issues again. And so I said, okay, I think you got parasites. From day one, I thought he had liver flukes, a form of parasite, just based on symptoms, based on what we were seeing in his testing, his mapping, his blood, the works. So he said, you got a parasite problem. Well, his body had some resources now to go deal with these parasites. So it started addressing them and he became inflamed again. So I said, let's try a parasite protocol, see what happens. He jumped on it, started vomiting with nausea. He got blood back in his stool. His immune system overreacted. What does that mean? When you try to remove something from the body, but you don't have proper drainage pathways, they're going to start making a ruck, right? You try to evict someone from a building, but lock the door and you keep telling them to get out. They're going to start banging on the walls and tearing stuff down and throwing things around and making a mess in your apartment. What you want to do is leave the door unlocked, have a clear path to the exit, and you can escort them out. And we try to escort these parasites out with these supplements, with these herbs and these protocols, if it's integrative through pharmaceutical or otherwise. If they can't get out, they start causing problems. And so he was experiencing all these extra symptoms. So we went back and said, okay, let's promote drainage now. We're going to promote liver detox and gallbladder flushes. We can do a gallbladder flush through olive oils and Epsom salts and other protocols that we can utilize. Coffee enemas Now, you'd be surprised, Leigh, we have to say, let the coffee cool down before you stick it up your butt. There are people who have burned themselves. Like, you told me to put coffee up there. I'm like, I shouldn't have to tell you this, but this is Darwinianism in action. So we have to go through now and flush these things out, promote bile detoxification. Like, bile recirculates about 95%. It's called enterohepatic recirculation, which, so entero, your intestines, hepatic being your liver, it recirculates a lot of it. Well, if your bile is dirty, it binds onto junk and tries to flush stuff out and detox you. If it's dirty and full of garbage, it's going to recirculate dirt and garbage. And so we can't get these drainage pathways out. You need to be able to have things stick and pull it through. And so we can clean up the bile. We can open the bile ducts. We can promote liver flushing and detox. And we can use things like NAC or N-acetylcysteine. We can use certain binders, your charcoals and humic and fulvic acid and all kinds of stuff to detox the body and open up these drainage pathways. We can go to sweating and red light therapy. And then that your drainage detox pathways are now more open, lymphatic drainage, lymphatic massage, acupuncture, rebounders, all these things that we can utilize. Some work more than others for certain people. So you have to be careful, because you get people who will do lymphatic massage and end up with migraines and getting more sick because you're still not detoxing. You just push stuff around the body. And so we have to go through a carefully curated process for you and your body to open up drainage. And then we went through and we're getting rid of this guy's parasites, and now he's doing better and feeling amazing. We see this all the time. And so people can go from healthy to worse. I had a woman come in. She had a really bad mold infection, confirmed, tested for it and everything. Symptoms were there. We got her out, mold infection, 15, 20 bowel movements a day, having accidents at work. We got the mold out of her body. We started getting the mold out. It takes a while, but 7 weeks in, she's down to 3 a day, rarely having accidents. She's back to the gym. She's exercising. She stopped bringing changes of clothes to work because she's like, I'm not going to crap my pants. I'll be fine. Well, then we introduced a new type of fiber into her diet. It was called glucomannan or glucomannan, however you want to pronounce it. It's also great for binding onto mold toxins, but it happens to be fantastic parasite food. Within 12 hours, she was right back to where she was, 15 bowel movements a day. And she goes, well, I got set back. I'm worse. I said, no. That's another layer. We pulled more paper back. We're getting closer to the bottom. Your body recognized when we fed this food, the parasites came up like fish in a fishbowl. They came to the surface. Now you can see them. Your immune system identified it, started attacking, and now you're inflamed again. And now we're on a parasite protocol. And now she's feeling even better than she was after the mold protocol process started. She's even better because she's closer to the bottom, closer to being healthy. And so it's all about layers and structuring this in such a way where each individual, number one, we have to have drainage. That's the basic. Number two, we have to go after the root cause. And this is where we get into what I call the 5 R's of reversing gut disease. And this can get a little bit complex, but if we start, we call it, say, an overview of what's really easy. The 5 R's are simple. Number one, once you've opened your drainage, you can now remove the problem, be it a parasite, a mold, a bacteria, a fungi, or whatever it is. Then you need to replenish the nutrients, right? We talked about your body, your factories in your body. Every organ system is a factory. The workers are the cells that make up those organs, and the tools they use are your nutrients. Well, your factory workers can't do their job to get the factory to produce the byproducts or the health or the outcomes you want if they don't have tools. So we have to remove the problem and replenish the nutrients. That's the second R. The third goes in tandem with the fourth, but that's rebuild the microbiome. Your microbiome has been askew because you're inflamed. Healthy things can't live in unhealthy environments. Inflammation is unhealthy. So we have to repair the tissues, right? Your house burnt down. You don't want to live in it, to repair the walls, repair the roof. And then your ecosystem, your family can live in there. The microbiome can come in and live and cultivate. So we've removed, we've replenished, we've rebuilt and repaired. Now we rejuvenate the immune system. We talked about boosting, how that can be a problem. If you're already imbalanced, you boost the imbalance. Rejuvenation brings it back and makes it stable again. It brings it back to level so it can begin healing and having healthy, normal inflammatory responses. So drainage is the first, and then the 5 R's: remove, replenish, rebuild, repair, rejuvenate.
Yeah, that's great. It's interesting. I know in recent years, because I mean, when I started doing functional medicine type work, 14 years ago, the 5 R's is what everyone was using pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
But then in more recent times, a lot of the advice has been, no, don't remove anything, just rebuild the microbiome. And when I was first hearing that, I was thinking, but why? Because what I've been doing so far has been working. So why would you change that? Have you got a view on that?
Yeah, I've heard that. Do you want me to pull up the 5 R's?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Is that what you're asking me? I can pull it up for you. Sure. Actually have a sheet. Share, present, video, share screen. Sorry, guys. I'm not stellar at this. Here we go. So these are our 5 R's. This is what they look like. So the first one, we get removing the problem. Now there are 5 R's. There's another set of 5 R's that they use for gut, and it is removing and rebuilding. But like you said, they go right to rebuilding the microbiome. But if you have a problem in there that's creating inflammation, which leads to dysfunction of your microbiome, then by not removing it, again, you're going back to the Western practice of ideology, which is treat the symptom. The microbiome is imbalanced. Let's fix that. Well, why did it become imbalanced in the first place? Well, it became imbalanced because there was inflammation. There was an infection. There was this, was that. And until we really understand that these problems exist for a reason, we're going to do the exact same thing your doctors did, which is chasing your symptoms with supplements or herbs or probiotics or something else. If your microbiome is imbalanced, it didn't happen on its own. And this is where we get into the nitty gritty of reversing these diseases. And again, 95% that we see right now in our program of people reversing Crohn's and colitis, the worst of the worst, let alone IBS, which can be a chip shot sometimes, but reversing the worst of the worst, 95% within 16 weeks. Like, I've never felt this good. And it can be done. It's just, it will take years after that. Our job is to get it reversed, remove the problem, and equip you with the tools to heal yourself. Otherwise, you're dependent on us for years and it gets very expensive. But to get you better, to reverse it and say, okay, great, here's how you rebuild your biome and your tissues on your own for the next 2 to 3 years. Do these and we'll see you later. Godspeed. Some people, they're out in a couple of weeks, a couple of months, like, I'm perfect. I'm off my meds and I feel amazing. Everyone's different, but it can be done. And that's what I want people to take away.
Yeah. Yeah. It's quite good for me to hear that someone's kind of on the same thought path as me, because I did find it very strange. And I don't know if you've heard this that's probably been the last 4 or 5 years, where people have said, no, you don't go after parasites or fungus, just rebuild the microbiome and that will deal with that on its own. And if that doesn't work, then maybe try and remove it. And I just think, well, I've been doing it for years. It's been working. Why would I change that? So it's good. It's good to hear that someone else is on the same thought path as me.
It's a little silly to think of it otherwise. I mean, even the doctors who say, well, parasites, I hear it all the time, and from GI doctors, they say, well, parasites don't exist. That's a third world problem. Then why do you deworm your cats and dogs every year? If parasites aren't a problem over here, right? They do exist. They do live here. They're transferable, especially in the world today where we import foods and all kinds of stuff. They're everywhere. Like right now, a good 50+% of our clients right now, at the time of this recording, as I'm talking to you, are passing parasites every day. We got a woman, she's passed them every day for over a week now. We're talking, I got a picture on here I can show you, Leigh, on another time so you don't gross out your audience. 15-year-old boy, his mom pulled out a 38-inch worm from his stool.
Wow.
38 inches. So to tell me they don't exist is crazy. We can see them clearly. And so there's all kinds of mucoid plaques and dark stuff and junk and parasites. And the thing is, we live in harmony in our guts with parasites and fungi. But when they become out of balance, this is when it's problematic. So again, back to the root. Why did this imbalance happen in the first place? You can fix the microbiome, but you're chasing your tail. It's like trying to put water on a fire while someone else is pouring gasoline on it at the exact same time. It's going to keep burning. It might be less, but it's going to keep burning. You're going, why can't I put the fire out? Because you didn't remove the problem. And that's what we always have to go back to. Now, the question is, can you remove the problem without getting sick? Are your drainage pathways open? Are your bile ducts open? Is your bile clean? Are you cleaning it? Is your liver able to do its job? So there's a lot of layers. It's very complex, but we're doing it. We're making it happen. We're giving people the tools they need to just get better.
Yeah. I mean, I've got 2 clients right now that are passing worms in their stools,
Amazing.
So to say that it's not an issue, then so it's a little bit silly. I once had a client, maybe 14, 15, maybe 16 years ago. He was a semi-professional soccer player, and he came to see me because he had a torn adductor muscle, and he'd been to see sports doctors and massage therapists and acupuncturists and physiotherapists. No one could help him with his groin injury. So when he was first talking to me, and I said to him, "Oh, in your paperwork it says you've got Crohn's disease," and he said, "Well, yeah." And I said, oh, okay. I didn't kind of go into any detail. And he said, what, could you help me with that? And I pretty much said what you said right at the beginning. I said, look, I don't know, but I do believe that disease can't live in a healthy body. And what I'm going to be teaching you to do is how to maximize your health. So we'll just see how we go. Anyway, it did actually take quite a long time, but we got to the issue with his groin. And then sometime afterwards, I was doing a day where I was inviting some of my ex-clients to come in and just do like a video, like a success story video. And I had them all lined up throughout the day. And he said, yeah, I'll come in. I don't mind being on video for you. So, he was talking about, he's a semi-professional footballer. He had this groin strain. No one else could help him, came to see me, and I did all these tests and everything else. Managed to get him back playing football. And then he said, and I wasn't expecting him to say this, and then he said, and by the way, Leigh did more for my Crohn's disease than any doctor I've ever come across before. Right? And it just comes back to health and disease can't live in the same body, because all I did was teach him how to get healthy.
I've had people in the past where we didn't have to go into these big deep dives. It's literally, let's fix your diet, work on some breath work to decrease your stress, and their colitis or their Crohn's disease went away. Remove the gluten. Sometimes it's just that easy because that's the one trigger. Many times it's multifactorial. There's many layers to the problem, but it doesn't have to be that way always. We have remarkable results for a good reason because sometimes it's so simple. Yeah. It really can be.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, a lot of things that you mentioned, liver gallbladder flushes, coffee enemas, all those things are all, for me, they're kind of standard practice, it's, and when, often when you suggest that to a client, first of all, if they've never done one before, they're a bit grossed out by it.
Yeah.
And I say, look, it's really no big deal. And I always say to them, do you know what? I felt a bit like, I'm not sure before I did my first one. And then one of my colleagues went, get over yourself and just do it. It's no big deal. And when he said that, I thought, okay, I'll just try it. And I did it, and it was no big deal. Not only that, but I felt good for doing it.
Just got to do it in the bathtub because it's a bit of a mess.
So again, what I've found is, as soon as someone does it the first time, they're like, why was I even concerned about worrying about doing that? It's no big deal at all. And we know that things like that have been used in the medical service for a very, very long time, right? And it's just, as the industry has gone more and more kind of pharmaceutical based, that those great healing tools have kind of faded away, really.
Well, there's a lot of basics. And I'd recently done an episode actually on my podcast. I forget exactly which one it was. I think it's episode 66, The Rise and Fall of Natural Medicine. We talked about that, how right back in 1860s, right around the Civil War, the American Civil War, 1861, they were in the middle of the war, 1862. And these things kept going, and they used natural herbs and remedies and sound wave therapy and all kinds of stuff. There was actually a book that became mega popular and went all the way across the southern states called Natural Resources of the Southern Fields and Forests. And it was all about herbs and plants, written by Dr. Francis Porcher. And he was a botanist, a pharmacist, and a physician, a medical doctor. And there are historians who credit this book for extending the war. It should have ended in 1863 all the way to 1865. It doubled the length of the war because of the anti-gangrene and the healing properties of these plants and herbs. Well, in 1870, John D. Rockefeller founds Standard Oil. Late 1800s, they're using them to create pharmaceuticals, enter the rise of things like penicillin coming in now in the late 18th, early 19th century. And then they went around the country, and he and Andrew Carnegie, steel tycoon, actually decided to go around the country and fund Andrew Flexnor to create the Flexnor Report, published in 1911, which actually uprooted every medical college and community about all these natural remedies and resources and plants and sound wave therapy that they were using to actually heal people from tumors and diseases and illnesses. And they uprooted it, jailed and demonized and criminalized doctors who spoke otherwise, wanted to go back to natural. And out of 155 medical colleges at the time, almost half of them closed. And then they started reopening under the new pharmaceutical banner. And it's been done ever since. It's been written about all the way to the 70s. They were using something called Leotrial. And I can end with this one here to kind of wrap things up. This Leotrial vitamin B19, you may have heard of, has been used in cancer treatment successfully in humans all the way to the 1970s. Well, there was a doctor, I forget his last name, but he was using this up through the early 1970s. And then the FDA came in, who actually was bought and organized by the Rockefellers, who decided that, well, this is going to be illegal now. It's dangerous. They decided. It was being used successfully for 100 years up to this point. And then this doctor, his clinic was closed. He was fined and put in jail. And now we have cancer treatments worth hundreds of thousands of dollars rather than apricot seeds. It's pretty crazy. And Leigh trial is available in 1,200 or more plants. And we talk about this all in episode 66. You can kind of dive into that one a bit. But just to kind of wrap things up, medicine has been shifted for the worse. And like you mentioned earlier at the beginning of this episode, a lot of it's for funds and profits, and some of it maliciously. There are a lot of well-meaning doctors who go to school and just don't know better because this is what they were told. This is what they were taught. This is what they know. And so we have to understand there's much more to the picture.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, I've been practicing 28 years now, and I've seen miracles happen in front of my eyes. And it would be amazing if we could have a health revolution and we could go back to how it was pre the Flexnor Report. And I mean, obviously in the UK and I think Canada as well, you know, we have tax funded medical systems, unlike the US. But I think it would actually be, whilst I think acute care would still be a good thing to be funded by the taxpayer, I think a lot of chronic degenerative disease, I think we should pretty much leave to the free market, because the doctors that are getting results will end up with all the patients and all the clients. And if a particular type of treatment isn't working, no one's going to, and it's killing people, no one's going to go there.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we need a revolution to create that. That's the only thing.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Awesome. And what's next for you, Josh?
More of this, man. On my bucket list here, I want to do more. We're actually trying to give people more resources to be able to get the help that they need. I got a TED Talk on my list, not yet. It's on my list coming up, trying to prepare for that, and writing a book. We'll call it maybe the IBD solution, something like that. We'll figure it out. That's the idea. So there'll be resources out there for you guys. We have lots on the website you can check out. If you need to find some stuff, everything can be found at gutsolution.ca. That's all singular, .ca for Canada, gutsolution.ca. There's access to a podcast all about the gut. There's resources. You can ask about our programs. We have some DIY stuff for a very cheap monthly membership. We have some custom stuff. You can come and work with us directly if you want to really expedite things. Everything can be found at gutsolution.ca.
Awesome. That's great. Josh, thank you so much. Time's absolutely flown talking to you, and I absolutely love the way that you use analogies to explain things in a really simple way. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. That's the goal. I hope it really sticks and lands with people to really make complex things very simple. I appreciate you having me on, and I'll look forward to chatting with you again sometime very soon.
Awesome. So that's all from Josh and me for this week. But don't forget, you can join me same time, same place next week on the Radical Health Rebel podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Remember to give the show a rating and a review, and I'll see you next time.